Hi, I'm Dick Miller, and today we're meeting with Jeff Smith. Jeff, nice to see you. It's been a month and a half or two, I
It
think.
has been, Dick.
I'll have to apologize to our viewers. I'm sitting with shorts, and it's 90 degrees out, but it sure
Yeah.
does feel good. So,
Been hit with a heat wave after a cold spring.
yes, and maybe next week it'll be cooler, more normal. We haven't met for a little period of time now, and we're trying to catch up on some of the things that happened or haven't happened. I think it might be good if you would just review. This is a segue into something else.
Sure.
Review the counties that that are part of the 31st Senate District.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so current district, I represent City of Eau Claire, western half of the County of Eau Claire, 5 townships in Dunn County, and then it kind of goes right across straight line for all of Pepin County, all of Pierce County except River Falls. That was cut out for a reason. We can talk about that. I think you're going to hit, and then all of Buffalo County, Trempealeau County, most of Trempealeau County, not all of, but almost most of it, and then a good portion of Jackson County, including Black River Falls. It's sort of my corners are I always say is Eau Claire, Prescott, Galesville, Black River Falls.
It's a pretty good chunk of territory.
Yeah, it is.
Now that's a segue into what's happened with the redistricting.
What's the new district look like? It's interesting. So, keeping in mind, gerrymandering occurred in 2011, and now I'm going to keep reminding people that this is the Supreme Court's gerrymandering. This is a court's gerrymandering, which is shameful, very partisan court that we now have in these days. So, when I mentioned that it cut out River Falls, the reason for that at that time was because Sheila Harsdorf represented the 10th Senate District, and she lived in town of River Falls. So just to make sure she was in that district, they circled around her to do that. Now, the fact is that Shannon Zimmerman, who has represented the 30th Assembly District, which is the Hudson area, has never lived in his district. He lives in the town of Clifton, which is in my district, the Senate District, and the 93rd Assembly District. So now what they've done is they've wrapped around him, so he will be in the new district, and put River Falls into my district. So rather than do that, they've done, if you can follow that. Then on the other end of the spectrum, they've Trig Prunchinski has not lived in his assembly district for 3 years. He moved into Pepin County, and so they have now done a loop around him in Pepin County into the 92nd Assembly District that doesn't affect my Senate district at all. That both of those were in it anyway, but I just think it's worth mentioning how this works. If anybody has any questions about gerrymandering, well, this is gerrymandering. To satisfy incumbents, incumbency. And when I hear people say about, term limits, let's talk about the fact that right now politicians are able to protect themselves by drawing lines around themselves and others. That's gerrymandering. That's more important than term limits. So then, but going back to the Senate district in itself, Black River Falls is now not included in my district, but Osseo is, which was previously not in. So that's a shift down the southern end, and I don't really know the reason for that.
The whole process of redistricting has taken so long, and it's been very hard on people who considered running for assembly or senate due to the fact that there was quite a debate, and it ended up in U.S. courts as well as the federal courts as well as the state courts, and there were various plans that came from the governor's office and the assembly and senate
Yeah, so the legislative maps that were passed, so you know this, but we'll go through this, walk through this. They were passed, of course, by the Republican majority, and the governor vetoed that map. And then the the state Supreme Court, the Republicans sued the governor then to go to the state Supreme Court and ask them to decide. Well, the state Supreme Court then chose to go with what the Republicans called least change. It was a new term. Of course, they wanted least change because they had created the maps in 2011, so they wanted least change from 2011.
Maintain the same.
Yep. So it was a new term, technical term, and the Supreme Court adopted that. Well, and I think I've said this in this program before, the governor then submitted a map to the state Supreme Court that was less change than what the Republican map that had been approved by the legislature was. Less change than theirs. It put the Supreme Court in a position of, did they really mean it or not? Well, three very partisan conservative justices didn't care. They actually stuck with the legislative map, the Republican map. But one, Justice Hagedorn took that to heart and said, well, the least change map is this one. So he sided with the three, what would be called our liberal justices. So it became a 4-3 decision that accepted the governor's map. Well, once again, the Republicans sued to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that, not that the map itself overall was bad, keep that in mind. They chose to send it back saying that the governor had created 7 districts that were minority majority districts. That meant that minority majority means that either Latino or African Americans were more likely to get representation on those districts. Now, the Voting Rights Act actually says you do need to do that, but it doesn't actually give numbers specific to that. The U.S. Supreme Court, though, ruled that the map that the governor's, how do I want to say this? The governor specifically said he did that for the very reason of giving them more representation, and somehow the Supreme Court has decided that that's not constitutional. So they sent it back for that reason, which means they could have the state Supreme Court really could have just adjusted those in Milwaukee and been done. But they waited like 6 weeks till the day that papers were supposed to be filed, which was April 15th. Not till 4 o'clock in the afternoon on April 15th, they released the Republicans' map again and said, this is the map you're going to use. So it's the state Supreme Court's map now, as far as I'm concerned. They chose not to just fix the least change map, instead to go with the most gerrymandered map.
Well, I guess it surprises me, and it maybe shouldn't, and I know this has come up before in our discussions about this very same topic, that people who run in a district live in another district. It just, to me, it's my naivety showing up maybe, that how could that ever happen? You know, I can understand someone wanting to move to a different location, but it's understood then that you give up something for that move.
That's right.
If I live in District 8 in Trempealeau County in terms of the county board. If I move out to, say I move to District 9, I'm obligated to resign because I no longer live there.
Yeah.
And to me, that's comprehensible. I can understand it.
And you know, don't get me wrong on this program. I'm not attacking anybody for that. I'm just pointing out the facts.
Yeah.
That's how, and it really is mostly to illustrate how politicians are really ignoring democracy and voters' rights with that sort of thing.
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
and so they draw lines based on, you know, their own interests rather than the interests of the voters.
The voters, yeah, yeah.
And also, by the way, the map that was submitted by the governor and was first approved by the state Supreme Court did not create a map that favored Democrats. It still was least change, being they had to follow the least change idea. It still favored Republicans. Just created a little more competitiveness, which is what we should have.
Yes, yes.
You should have some competitiveness. The district I live in that we're talking to right now, this is a very competitive district. It's actually a 48% Democratic district, 52% Republican district. So, you know.
Well, and the whole concept, as I understand, where you have that balance, and we've talked about balance, that where you have a balance of people who lean Republican and or Democrat, where that is a fairly even number, there's a tendency to be able to then judge whether or not they like their representative, and they can obviously they'll switch to the other one, but in the case of gerrymandering, we're locked in. You draw a line so that it isn't a choice between the parties. There is not a choice because of the way it's set up.
It is, as long as people are predictable. There's that, right? We are just too predictable as voters. And so we can sometimes, in some ways, blame ourselves that they are able to do that. Put all your data in a computer, and this is the way it comes out. You know, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, you're a libertarian, you're a Green Party, because that's what your data tells them. We are too predictable.
And we have better methodologies and technologies to evaluate that.
Right. I mean, they're tracking your purchases online. They're tracking the magazines you read, the subscriptions you have, and you think it's about voting. Well, we don't know how you vote. That's the one thing that's secret. And then you wonder, how do they know this? Well, because of all this other data now that they have on people.
Yeah. Data mining is a big business.
Yes, it is. It sure is.
It's a real big business.
Yeah.
Moving on a little bit, the Senate is not in session now.
No.
And that's been for a while now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 1st of March.
And so, how do you, as a state senator, continue working? What are you doing these days?
Campaigning.
Okay.
Like I said, April 15th is when things really started, because that's when you start. You pull papers and start collecting nomination signatures, and I've been doing that. And Dick, I tell people, I'm not afraid to tell people this. I think it's wrong, the system that we have, that legislators in the state of Wisconsin, and it's gotten earlier and earlier in the year that they've stopped session and gone into campaign mode. If you think that we are like anybody else and we have to give something up to campaign, you're wrong. We continue to get paid. We continue to get paid, and if someone wants to challenge us, they either got to take a leave of absence to be a serious challenger, or find some way of paying the bills in the meantime, or only part-time campaign. I don't think that's right. I've been on both ends of that. I don't think it's right. And even as a legislator, I'm willing to say that as out loud. I told it to a Towns Association meeting last night, and there was someone there representing Ron Johnson, and I turned to Scott and I said, Scott, just like federal legislators are in session right now. They have 5-week work period. Then they take a break. Then they have another. They go right into September of election year. Right into September. We're talking about traveling across the country to get to your office.
Place of work, yeah.
So why it has always puzzled me why we think as state legislators we should have that time off to campaign when there's work to be done. We have left work on the table. We have left things on the table that did not get passed, that should have been done. And we have to start all over from scratch next January. So you got to wait 10 months and start all over again for all those people out there who had maybe big hopes of things that they had asked for in legislation that now is not getting done.
So I think we consider legislators in this state to be full-timers.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that in terms of doing work for the people, it isn't full-time, is it?
Not
It's
during this period of
Yeah, it's a
time.
lot less due to the well, and obviously whoever is in control of the legislature can dictate when you take that break to go campaign.
Well, and honestly, it's a calendar that is approved by the legislature in like the first week that we're in session, next January, for instance. But I'm in the minority, and this is the way the majority chooses to do that. But honestly, it's been that way for a long time. I do know in the first decade of this century, when I was in the legislature for a short time, we were done in May, I think, a couple months later. But it still is like the world doesn't stop just because we choose not to work anymore.
Legislation does, though.
But legislation
It
does.
stops, yeah.
But things, I guess I get the fact that we could come back anytime if there was an emergency. But have you seen how special sessions that the governor calls go?
Yeah,
It doesn't happen.
The controlling party does not, they shut it down immediately.
Because that's politics as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason this happens. You've got a governor from one party and the legislature controlled by another party, and so the legislature doesn't want to send things to the governor that may help him look good for the next election.
Yeah, and I think what as an idealist, what bothers me is that I would hope that the governor and the legislature would be more concerned about making the whole government look better, all of the facets of government look better.
Yeah.
But instead, it's always one against the other, which does not set well with those of us in the public.
No, I know. There seems to have been a lost vision here.
Yeah.
That when we do good things, we all win.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we can do it together.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it separately. And I guess you and I, again, maybe we've repeated this before. There are good ideas coming from the wide range of people who serve as our representatives. There are good ideas, and we should honor the fact and respect the fact that there are good ideas. Let's work together, and I think that's why.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's why legislature, in terms of ratings, never rated very high?
Oh, geez. Look at where Congress is, right?
Oh my goodness!
Congress
yes.
is in the low teens or something.
Yeah,
like
they're much less than. And it could be different. We know that.
But what's interesting in that, by the way, is that we all think it's somebody else that's bad, but not the person we elect. And that's why people in Congress keep getting reelected, but they have a 13% favorability.
Yeah.
It's like, well, now at some point we all have to do a little looking in the mirror and think maybe something's going on here.
And I think that brings us almost right back to where we started, and that is the incumbent has the opportunity to bypass their challengers. Oftentimes, even though they have not such a good record, they have the time off. They have access to the media. Certain things that the challengers don't have.
Oh yeah, I mean you start with name recognition,
Absolutely.
right? So yeah, that's why I think public funding of campaigns is really important. That we all have that level playing field of what funds you have to work with, because as an incumbent, you have advantages built in to start with, and there's nothing you can do, nothing you can do about that. You should have those. If you're doing a good job, then that works for you.
Absolutely.
And you know, public funding works, and that takes a whole nother show to help people
Talk
understand
about
that. But that and restrict gerrymandering with redistricting reform. There's just a number of things we can do, and adopt the bill that I have that has gotten a lot of attention, called Final Five voting, which creates a ranked choice voting system. So anybody is encouraged actually to run, and encouraged to vote who you really like, rather than thinking that you got to vote for one of the two. There's choices you can make.
I think another thing, maybe I can throw in, it may be beneficial to have a limited period of time of campaigning too. You have certain things you can't do until a given date. And that would maybe even out the playing field a little bit for the new challenger.
Well, so in fact, that reminds me of another really important piece that people don't even think about: issue ad disclosure. And what issue ad disclosure is that you need to know who actually is contributing to that little known group you see in the disclosure of an ad or a mailer that you get that you've never heard of before. Well, they created it out of nowhere. It could be 3 billionaires, for all you know, that call themselves this group, that are sending awful stuff about somebody. You should know who contributes, just like I have to submit everyone who contributes to my campaign. That's public knowledge. Public knowledge also should be on all issue ads. We call them issue ads because, they get away with it by not saying vote for or vote against, and they call them issue ads. Well, we need to know who is contributing to that. That's a game changer if we do that as well, because they're taking away the control that candidates might have on their own campaigns. I mean, we lose total control when all that stuff's going out there, and they're smothering the real issues and the real candidates.
Well, and I think a lot of us as voters would like to know who's supporting this, so we can maybe determine why. And what's behind this.
But trust me, if they had to have their name on it, that stuff wouldn't even show up anymore. And that's what they fight back against. Well, it's freedom of speech. Fine, but your freedom of speech anonymously is not the same thing. You cannot be anonymous if you want to practice freedom of speech. We need to know who you are.
Well, you should be willing to be heard. And people know who you are.
But the reason they wouldn't put it out there is because their businesses rely on that.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I think we do a lot of, we have no idea, in terms of people who operate businesses, we have no idea what their stands are on issues, except for those that are verbally and tell you. At least then you know.
Yeah, who wants to be honest about it? Are they ready to be honest about it? And don't get me wrong about this either. I'm not even taking a side on this. I don't think this should be, anyone should be able to just do that with anonymously.
Absolutely. And as you as a candidate, you want to know who's making these comments, because they may affect you positively or negatively, but you sure as heck want to know.
More importantly, I want us to win as a nation and as a state, and have democracy survive. And it's not going to survive the way things are going right now. And I'm not going to be here forever, and you're not going to be here forever. Those changes have to be made, and some more. It isn't going to be one change that makes a difference. It's going to be a number of changes, and we have to have the courage and the backbone as elected legislators and Congress people to make those changes for the future.
We want to touch on. Governor Evers was here in this part of the state. Was it last Friday?
So it was, it was about a week ago, from today.
Yeah. Can you tell us why he was here?
You
were with him part of the time.
Yeah, we were here for a brewery tour, which was really actually incredible, the business they're doing. But he was he had his whole table of secretaries here. You know, they all gathered there at that point, but they had been around the state, meeting in various, like the farm tour with the DATCAP, with secretary, and other things that were going on. But they came together in Eau Claire to meet, and it was just really interesting, mostly to promote our economic development. That was the biggest issue, the biggest thing, and how how the governor has made some really good choices with that ARPA money and how it goes. The governor has put 58% of that ARPA money into small business and agriculture. No other governor in any other state has come close to putting that kind of money into small business and agriculture, which were the most concerning issues during the pandemic, of whether they could survive that and continue to do business. And I really commend the governor for understanding that that's where it should go, not to the big businesses, but to Main Street and our country roads.
Yeah, and I think you're referring to the federal dollars that flowed into the state to help to deal with the pandemic.
And it was in the hands of the governors to decide where it was spent.
So that's good to know. We'll move into some of the last thing here. We're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got
caught up in.
We got caught up in, but it was very interesting. How's the campaign going? Let's touch on that for a second.
Well, we've collected signatures and we're doing well. I'll be able to submit my signatures like anybody else, and that's one thing people are surprised. You're already in. You still got to collect. Yes, that's one good thing. It's an even playing field. We all have to earn it to be on the ballot. Otherwise, you know, I can't be certain. I know that a couple people have filed to run against me, and it'll be an interesting year. You know, we'll see on June 1st who actually makes the ballot, and then go from there. And it's just like I said, it's going to be another interesting campaign year.
Yeah. Well, we wish you well, and I would imagine it's a lot of work, and I'm tired of thinking about it.
Well, it is, but I actually enjoy the work part of it. I get in shape. I walk a lot of miles.
Yeah.
But it's you know, finally I'm free to do that sort of thing that I really like, face to face, knock on doors. I'll be in my truck, stop and talk to me when you see me, and hopefully we'll be better prepared for January of next year.
Yeah. Well, if you see him on the street, it's a not so new pickup with a big sign.
Not so new.
And as you know, he likes to talk and listen to what people have to say. So.
Yep.
So stop by.
Thank you.
And I thank you for being with us today, and wish you well. We'll talk again.
All right, Dick.
Thank you.